Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick comparison between one of my favorite lenses for my Sony full-frame E-mount cameras. This is the PZ28-135 f4G series lens, a cinema kit lens, if you will, that's incredibly versatile. It is fairly large. It retails for roughly $2,500 US, and it really has become a go-to for me. Even though it's big, it pretty much accomplishes just about anything I would want to do, both in still and video form, on my A7R IV or my A7R II. And that's why I really like this lens. Of course, it has stabilization, it has a servo, aka power zoom, and the range is pretty solid. I mean, 28 to 135 is no joke, and the images and video really are very sharp out of this. But Sony users in general, specifically cinema users, were not incredibly pleased with this hybrid lens because, after all, until the A7S Mark III, everything that was natively shooting 4K was not really leveraging a full-frame sensor. So they designed a very similar, if not identical lens, pretty much, just about, in an APS-C form, which is this one right here, which is the PZ18-110. Now, this retails for over, or roughly, $1,000 or more more than its full-frame counterpart that I just told you I own. This is a loaner from Sony, and it also is a pleasure to shoot with, but because things have shifted, and now with the A7S III delivering essentially best-in-class 4K video capability that is coming natively from a full-frame sensor, meaning no crop, there's no need for this APS-C lens at the end of the day. So when I was trying to decide between these two, I knew that because this lens retailed for $1,000 more did not mean it was inherently better. It meant that it delivered something that you couldn't do with the full frame one that I own. And that is, it delivered really, in my opinion, ultimately, just a wider angle. And because it's APS-C, it also isn't as fast. Yes, they're both rated at f4, but you have to remember, because this is APS-C, in a full frame world, that's not a true f4. It's a true f4 in an APS-C 4K realm, which is what this was designed to do. And it does a very good job, but I would say, overall flexibility that this lens has to offer is not nearly as important in my personal use and workflow as the full frame counterpart. And yeah, that is the way things worked out. I mean, had Sony stuck with APS-C being the optimal or primary way to capture 4K video, then this lens might be the preferred choice, because 18 millimeters, granted it's again an equivalency, a 35 mil equivalency, is a much better starting point for anyone who's looking at these two lenses side by side. In fact, the whole reason I feel like this was even developed was because Sony got a tremendous amount of feedback from people shooting documentaries, run and gun news, and 28 just wasn't wide enough. Because it's not that the quality of the glass here isn't good enough. In fact, I think for $2,500 US, the quality of the glass here is pretty amazing. Now, it's not going to necessarily supplant or replace lenses that are at a whole nother tier, economically speaking, but for its price, you're not going to find anything else that performs like this, has power zoom, and again, as unruly as some may see it, I have traveled with this, of course not during the pandemic, and shot to my heart's content. It is heavy, but again, I don't have a single lens that can accomplish what this can for still and video. So this, I thought, might be a better option at the time, because, you know, ultimately these are designed primarily to be video lenses, but as I've stated through the course of this video, that has shifted, because now with the A7S Mark III, we have a camera that no longer relies on cropping to get 4K, because with the A7S, we're getting 4K natively from its 12 megapixel sensor with no pixel binning. So at the end of the day, a lens like this can only shoot in full HD on the A7S, which is incredibly disappointing. Still really nice quality, but, you know, outside of capturing, and there are a lot of you out there that still do shoot in full HD, and one of the benefits of the A7S Mark III, unlike a lot of its full-frame counterparts, the more hybrid cameras like the A7R IV, A7 III, A7R II, the A9 series is that when you try to shoot 1080p video, the quality just isn't as good as I think many would like it to be. So the A7S Mark III does deliver in that realm, and that's where, again, if you're trying to shoot exclusively in Full HD, which this was not designed for, it was specifically designed for 4K, that ironically is its best existence with the A7S Mark III, so it still has a place. But as I was saying, I am so glad that I went with this lens, because if there is an A7S Mark III in my future, this is going to be the better performer, not just because natively I can capture 4K, but I actually like this lens better in just about every way. And it's interesting because when I did my homework on these two, the majority of reviews that I read, because there's not that much about these two on YouTube, really pointed towards the more expensive, newer APS-C kit lens being the better of the two. Incredibly similar, but better. But in my experience, the only advantage this really had was being a wider starting point. Now, there are a lot of complaints about the fly-by-wire system on here, but I don't really take issue with that. So for me personally, not a big issue. And the fact that I can use this with any of my cameras and really get, as I've stated, the best of both worlds, which is what I like to shoot. I'm a hybrid shooter. I want to shoot great video and great stills, so as close to a zero compromise as I can get. That's what I get with this guy. This, on the other hand, at this point in time, is literally just a compromise, and that's because, as I told you, with the A7S Mark III, you can't shoot anything but full HD with this lens. So this lens is now relegated to being a kit lens for Sony's cinema cameras, which it still has a very relevant point in essentially assuming, or role in that it assumes. But for me, again, this is the winner every single time. So newer and more expensive doesn't always mean better. And that's really the reason I'm sharing this video. For any of you that were curious about whether or not, the full frame version of this lens, if it's on your short list, is it going to be a mistake? I think the A7S III just confirms that the full frame is the way to go. You save money, you get better performance, in my opinion, overall. Yes, if you need to have that wider starting point and you're not shooting with the A7S Mark III, then this is the way to go. I mean, if you are that user, you already know that you need it, and so you'll end up shooting with this. But if 28 is suitable, then by all means, I think having the 28 to 135, you get a little more reach, and I still think 28 is a pretty good starting point. It's not perfect. I would prefer 18, but until that exists, we've got to work with what does. And as I've said, both of these lenses are very good. Construction's great. Weather sealing, autofocus performance, very good, even though I was just talking about the autofocus on this one, some people having complaints, and I understand that, but for me, not an issue. And that's why I was essentially just here to let all of you know that if you're thinking about this one, the 28 to 135, you can get off the fence, because now it's just been cemented by the A7S Mark III that it is the hybrid lens to own, in my opinion. Really nothing will best it in what it is natively capable of doing. This was the only lens that could have taken it out of the picture, but now that we have true 4K with no pixel binning out of the A7S Mark III, the comparison, the argument is pretty much over. So again, if you're exclusively shooting APS-C 4K video with Sony, this is likely still the better option if you need that wider angle. And both of these are designed to be, as I've stated, for shooting documentaries, news. You're not going to necessarily make a feature film with them, but you have that flexibility. There's very little focus breathing on these. So they're both great choices, but at the end of the day, I'm just so glad that I picked the 28 to 135 because this is really my weapon of choice when it comes to shooting. And if you follow my channel, again, you know I love having hybrid capability. I don't want to be essentially cornered into one thing. Of course, if you have a specialized need, specialized purpose, then it makes sense. There's no question about it. But for me personally, this was my choice then, and it appears I made the right choice because at the end of the day, this is the one that can adapt seamlessly to the A7S III if I ever want to make that transition, and it still works beautifully on my A7 R4 and R2. This guy, on the other hand, you already know. It's all about living in APS-C, which I'm not going to say has become antiquated, but the A7S III has certainly now raised question marks that didn't exist before about this lens, especially with its $3,500 or $3,600 price tag versus the $2,500 that this runs. And remember, this is not only less expensive, but also a faster piece of glass since it is a full-frame f4 as opposed to an APS-C f4. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button, and as usual, please feel free to subscribe, and please stay safe. Later.